Today's learning target is I can solve and graph linear equations. Today we're going to be talking about linear equations. Okay, here's an example of a linear equation. Now, what makes this a linear equation is that if we were to graph this out on a coordinate grid, we'd see that we would have a straight line. The graph would be a straight line. And we're going to see that a little later, what that looks like. So let's say we were going to plug in a 1 for our x-coordinate. We could see that the y-coordinate would be 60, because 60 times 1 is 60. Or if I were to plug in 2 for my x-coordinate, my y-coordinate would be 120. So if we graphed a set of these numbers, it would be a straight line. One of the things we're going to do today is we're going to use a table to help us find ordered pairs. So we're going to use this table right here that I've created to help us find 4 solutions for this equation, y equals 7 times x. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to write those solutions as ordered pairs, because once they're ordered pairs, then I could graph it. The first part of this table right here is going to have us pick 4 numbers that we can plug into this equation. Okay, so I'm going to pick 4 numbers that are easy to work with. So I chose these 4 numbers right here. They're easy to work with. You can choose any 4 numbers. In the second part of this table right here, we're going to plug in the number that we chose to use for x into our equation. So now I've done that right here. You can see when I chose x to be -1, it plugs in right here. When I chose x to be 0, it plugs in here. Okay, x to be 1 here, and x to be 2 plugs in right there. Now you can see why it's important to choose numbers easy to work with. I also like to choose smaller numbers because later if I have to graph them, I want my x and y coordinates to be fairly small. But again, you could choose any numbers and it will work. Now my next part of the table right here, I'm going to solve my equation in order to figure out what y would be. So here I've done that. So when x was -1 and I plugged it into the equation, y was -7. When x was 0, y would be 0, because 7 times 0 is 0. When x was 1, y is 7. When x was 2, y was 14. Let's take a look now at how we graph linear equations. There are 2 terms that we're going to want to know when dealing with linear equations. One is the x-intercept, the other is the y-intercept. And basically what this, let's take a look at the x-intercept is the x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. So right here, here's where our graph line is, and it crosses the x-axis, which is this axis, right here. So we can see that that's 2. That would be at 1, 2. So the x-intercept is 2, and the y-intercept is the same thing. It's just where this graph line crosses the y-axis, which is right here. Here's the y-axis. It crosses right here, and that would be at 1, 2, 3. So the y-intercept for this line is 3. Now the reason that these two, the x-intercept and y-intercept, are important is because if we want to graph an equation, then if we can find our y-intercept and we can find our x-intercept, all we have to do then is place a line through those 2 points, and that's how we would graph the equation. So let's take a look at how we would do this here. We're going to graph -2x plus y equals 4. So here I'm showing you what the graph actually looks like. So this is going to be your finished answer, but I'm showing it to you because I want you to see how do we get this line right here, this graph for this equation here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to find, if you remember, our x-intercept point and our y-intercept, the point where the points will cross the x-intercept, or the x-axis and the y-axis. So to find the x-intercept, this point right here, to do that, what we do in our equation is we're going to place a 0 in for y. Okay, because we want the y-coordinate to be 0, which makes sense because when we're graphing this one, if we want to find the x-intercept, the y is going to have to be at 0, right? If the y was at 1, then we would go over and it wouldn't be on the x-axis here. So in order to be on the x-axis, your y-coordinate needs to be at 0. So I rewrote the equation, but for y, I put in a 0. Okay, so now that gives me, I can see here, negative 2x equals 4, and I just solve it out, divide by negative 2, and x is going to equal negative 2. So as an ordered pair, I know that x, remember x always goes first, so x is negative 2 when y is 0. So that would be my first ordered pair, and you can see that's where this graph shows that. So there's my x-intercept. Now to find the y-intercept, I'm going to do the same thing, but I want to find where the point will cross on the y-axis. So we can see that for x, we want to place 0 in here because we don't want to move here or to the left or to the right here on the x-axis. We want the x-axis right here to be right at 0, so that all we do is figure out where on the y-axis the point is. So I rewrite my equation here and I plug in 0 for the x-axis because I'm going to try to find the y here, and I can see that negative 2 times 0 is 0 plus y, okay, is just y equals 4. So my coordinates here are going to be, my x is going to be 0 and my y is going to be 4. Now at this point I've found both my x-intercept and my y-intercept. So all I do is I just graph those 2 points, okay, and then I draw a straight line between those 2 points, and that's how I would graph that linear equation.